Thank you for BSides Hong Kong having me today. I prepped this talk in English, but I intend to do the self-intro in Cantonese because it's more friendly and warm and so forth, and some of the jokes in Cantonese as well. But all the technical details I will intend to speak in English, so don't worry about that. Reverse engineering rumor. The story behind weaponizing Intune Conditional Access bypass. So it is a big mouthful of thing or word to say, but we'll get into what those means. But basically, in December last year, there was a rumor in the security community that somebody is able to bypass some Microsoft 365 restriction. Before that, how many in the audience works in the offensive role, like pen testing or red teaming? Quite a few. Okay, cool. How many of you deal with Microsoft 365 in like work in general, like use Exchange or so forth? No? Yeah, should be a lot of people use M365, right? Anyhow, so we were one of the most earliest ones to weaponize this and publish a POC in the community. So we feel it's good to talk about the story, right? I've talked about this topic like elsewhere a couple of times, but every time I go through the vulnerability, how to defend against this and so forth. But actually the discovery process was quite interesting on its own. So this time I intend to talk about like how does the discovery process work. But it's a bit technical, a bit off too, but the reverse engineering quote unquote has nothing to do like with binary reverse engineering, in case you're wondering, right? Part two was like the drama with regard to releasing a POC during Christmas. It's also quite fun, which I never talked about it on stage before. And also thank you for the organizers putting me at this spot. So I hope I don't delay lunch forever too much. Maybe you guys are confident in my presentation skills, hopefully. 咁就介紹翻少少自己啦。新年呢張相係喺倫敦嗰度，咁有個同事嚟嘅。咁我做 sales simulation 主要係 red teaming。咁就小弟嗰條 team 都做好多唔同嘅 red team 嘅。咁但係我專嗰範咧就 Microsoft 365 authentication stack。咁所以就呢個係我冇擺我啲 certification 上去咧，香港啲行家好多相喎，真係有啲 intimidated。呢個係小弟第4個 B-side 上台講，咁曾經有一個咧好有趣嘅，佢嗰個主辦即係最大 logo 個 sponsor 咧係 Microsoft， 但係我上台咧鬧 Microsoft 跟住之後事後就有幾位 Microsoft 嘅同僚咁去挑機，唔係友情對話咁嘅 Q&A， 咁都幾得意咁。好彩今日就冇呢樣嘢啦，咁多謝你留意啊。咁我小弟嘅 social 啦，如果想即係 get in touch 冇問題嘅，大家傾下偈咁交流下。OK。So let's set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. This LinkedIn post was the sort of like the end results of our research that went viral. We can see like 180,000 views. The video, which is like a 30-second demonstration, wasted 200 hours of people's life, which makes me a little guilty. The post drop itself was on 27th, so like 2 days after Christmas. And you can see this guy, Benjamin, he did a YouTube video like demonstrating our tool and so forth, which is pretty cool. And like a little more reaction piece, we got on HID News, which is published by Microsoft themselves, like and there were detection rules written for our thing like 3 days after it was published, so people were taking notice, which is pretty cool as well. But how do we get to that point, right? The full timeline was first rumor happened on the 11th November, it's like mid-November, and end of December was the post drop and went viral, obviously. The fun part was the juicy bits we can get into. But the rumor itself first, right? If you do like offensive stuff in Azure, Microsoft 365 and so on, you might have used like Row Tools, Graph Runner, that kind of tools before that deals with the Graph API, right? So in 11th of November, there was like a a Twitter post by Outflank. If you don't know Outflank, they own CobbleStrike, so it's like a parent company of CobbleStrike. They have a paywall，即係你要咧，你課金你先可以 join 呢個咧 Outflank OST 咁，我哋冇買啦，咁即係見到 Twitter post。So we saw somebody saying okay they allow this paywall tool to be used by their customer to bypass like the Intune restriction. I'll go into what those means afterwards, right? But the first first news was 11 November, but we didn't buy the tool. We don't know like anyone who does. So right. So what the Twitter post said was bypassing caps, right? But what are caps? So Entra ID is the authentication stack of Microsoft 365 and Azure, and CAPS means conditional access policies, which sort of like this game show, your game show, you force your users to sign in with specific conditions. For example, from a company device, company IP with 2FA, so on and so forth. So the whole is sort of like specially designed for your users' use case, and the yellow wall block the bad guys and like throw them in the water and so forth, right? And if you deal with the M365 or Entra authentication stack, you know like very often that the wall have holes where the attacker can get through. But I won't go into details on conditional access holes or gaps, but this is like a passion area of mine. So we can talk like offline if you want to talk about conditional access gaps. Anyhow, so more pictorially, you can think of the Entra ID, the Microsoft Authentication Server, as like a check. It does two checks: whether you present the correct grant, it can be like a username, password, MFA, or cookies, or access refresh token. That's the grant. And the conditions is sort of like a wall you need to fit through as well. And besides like the IPs and device and so forth, you can potentially be blocked due to like a client, wrong client. For example, you request a token for Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, or Office.com, but the company doesn't allow that client to sign in specific conditions and so forth. And then if everything passed, everything looks good, you'll be issue your session token and be logged in, and otherwise you'll be access denied, right? So this like a simple representation of how conditional access policy work. But what is like an enrolled device, right? So think of this as like a company device, right? 即係你公司部電腦咁樣，咁咩為止公司部電腦咧？咁like a blank factory reset device needs to go through enrollment to be called enrolled or company managed. So there's a process that involves the user signing into Microsoft, and they can get some tokens in that process. And I don't want to go into details into like what a compliant or join and so forth are, but there are some differences, right? And we go back to the original post. It says Rotune allows red teamers to bypass caps by faking compliance registration and get secrets from applications and so forth. So this enrollment process is what the bypass lies in. So a month later, after like the initial news of the paywall tool, it was Black Hat Europe time. It was 20th of it was 11th of December. Right, happened in London. This Japanese consultant called Yuya went on stage, talked about unveiling the power of Intune and so on and so forth. And he worked at SecureWorks, by the way. SecureWorks does amazing work as well in this field. So Dirk Jan here on the screenshot was the person who did the first like paywall version for Outflank, and he also is the author of Road Tools, by the way, so he's very cool. But so the other guy went on stage to talk about like how to do the bypass, so he cannot paywall this anymore. So he disclosed like, okay, it's out of the bag now. You can try to POC it yourself if you want to, right? 即係佢又爆響口啦，我都爆啦，咁大家都爆啦咁樣。咁有個 so he disclosed the client ID as well as like the Intune company portal. So these are the two like kind of hints on like where the actual bypass is, right? So a quick recap of what we've talked about so far. Black Hat EU talk was about using the Intune company portal and that client ID to bypass the requirement to sign in from like a company device, right? So it can be used to bypass compliant and hybrid joint requirements. It can be used to enroll new devices. And most importantly, the access tokens can be used to access Graph APIs, such as like your Graph Runner or Roll tools that the red teamers love, right? At the time, we didn't have the slides. We only have like the company portal like app name as well as the client UUID. So how do you POC a bypass just with this two sort of information in mind, right? So the what is like the end goal of what we are trying to do is to be able to run our offensive tools in restrictive client environments, right? And the how is to perhaps authenticate to the M365 stack with like a specific way, right? With a compliant device cap without using a compliant device, but it has to deal with the authentication process. And like the how would, I imagine that like the red teams using a Microsoft Zero Day on the next engagement, you feel, very cool and so forth. And the knowns and unknowns, we know the client ID, we know the client application's name. So those are the known variables so far. And unfortunately here I have to get a little bit deeper and technical into like how OAuth works, because you deal with the authentication process. So you need to understand a little bit about like how authentication works. There are different grants defined in OAuth 2. The primary one I'm going to get into is authorization code, but there are others like refresh token, device code that I will go into. And on stage in conference talks, I like to say, I RTFM'd during my research. So here's what it is. The OAuth 2 authorization framework is actually written by some guy in Microsoft, interestingly. But to make this SKR diagram better, I'll explain that later anyway. But the most important error code that is relevant to us is what is OAuth 2 is you have an application, think about Jira or Confluence, everything is Jira. Or think about your SaaS application like some kind of Salesforce, yes. So you want to sign into your SaaS application, but the SaaS application doesn't handle the user identity. Another entity handles the user identity, for example, like your Google, your Entra ID, that's Microsoft, or Facebook, or whatever. So there's a process where the application directs the user away from itself to the identity provider, and then the identity provider will redirect back to the application, right? There's like a back and forth process in itself. And in the sign-in URI, there is a redirection URI that is defined. And this redirect URI must not be changed, and otherwise the identity provider would never redirect the user back. Well, I've tried it many times, it wouldn't work because it's in the RFC, right? So we are going to see like how a sort of login URL looks like. The most important bit is in red, like redirect URI is defined as office.com landing v2, and it must correspond to the client ID of office.com, otherwise like Microsoft wouldn't allow you to go through, right? And response type is code, that means we're going through the authorization code flow, and scope I won't go into really. But so that is sort of like the SVR photo that is made pictorially. The user goes through the browser to get into to be redirected to enter ID, they complete the authentication, get in password to have a code, whatever, and then interestingly, in the third step, the user would get a special authorization code in the get parameters, like code equals 1串嘢咁樣, and then the user would be redirected to the redirect URI. Here we say is legit.server.com, and then the SaaS application would redeem the session cookie for the user, right? So what we can imagine the problem would be if I send the user a phishing link, right, with like the correct client ID, but the redirection I set as my attacker server. If the user completes the authentication in the IDP will throw an error. The redirection is wrong. I won't give you the authorization code. Otherwise, the user can. Otherwise, I can collect the authorization code and means like correct or valid session token from user. So again, the message after RTFM is redirect URI is not arbitrary. Microsoft doesn't publish their first-party apps redirections. So this is actually the main thing that we need to find out in the process. And then we head into the research setup that we need to, how do I POC this? What do I need, right? I need an entry ID like a tenant, right? Pretending to be a company. And I need the correct license to be able to set it up so that there's a conditional access rule requiring compliant device for all Chau apps to sign in, right? And then I could do whatever I want to until I get it or I give up, right? So the first approach, because they say is device registration whatever bypass. The first thing I tried, okay, device code also has device in it, the name as device in it. Does it work? Well, it does not. Unfortunately, you can specify client ID when initiating a device code login, but unfortunately, it was blocked. It said your client sign-in was successful, but your admin required the device to be, registered in our domain to access this resource. And so then, here we go. We know it has something to do with the company portal app. So how do we, POC the attack from the app itself? The first thing I did was using the app access. So I downloaded from MS App Store and tried to sign in, and indeed I did sign in. So on the access log, we can see the first one failure. It means the device code attempt was failed, but the using the app access, a normal user would it got through, and the client ID matches that of the the rumor client ID, right? But we didn't know how it worked, unfortunately, because me using the company portal app, it doesn't do anything useful in the red team. So I need to extract the authentication flow for me to analyze in order to write my tools, right? And but I didn't want to do the man in the middle between the app itself and Microsoft, because it's very troublesome. I'll go into why later. But anyhow, the third approach I did was trying other known redirections like native client, which is also in sort of the MS documentations. But it didn't work, unfortunately. It was shown like the redirection URI native client was not configured with the application. It's basically a URI mismatch. Right, the client is not allowed to sign in through this redirection. So unfortunately, right. So the fourth, which is the last and the hardest one, was to try to get TLS layer HTTP proxy working for a fake client device. So if you do pen testing for mobile apps or like for fake clients like C# or Java clients, you might have done some of this before. So you set up the system proxy as the Burp Suite proxy, and then you install Burp Suite's certificate to the system, root C store, and then listen on. I think localhost would work because it's like a local application, and install Burp Suite's certificate and as a local machine root certificate, and then I did a curl from PowerShell and it ended up on Burp and it's on HTTPS. So I know TLS is working, and also I tried Firefox. Is also like using the Burp Suite certificate. So I know the proxy was working from the shell as well as from like a client application. Okay, now onward to company portal. It did not work. It just refused to sign in whatever I do after I've set up the proxy. It's like login error, but I won't tell you the error, but you can share the error with Microsoft, right? No, I won't. So what happened? Well, my speculation was there is probably some sort of certificate pinning or some sort of mutual TLS check or like some sort of proxy detection, one of those, right? So I was pretty like down and pretty frustrated at that point. And some of my friends, colleagues at work suggested a couple of like honorary mentions, right? For example, I tried the Linux Microsoft company portal app, which didn't work at all. Like it just didn't work flat out. It was on like Ubuntu 22.04, didn't work. I tried to start a developer console, which like my friend suggested, like try to press like F12 or Control Shift J to see like if the JavaScript console pops up. It does not. So there are no logs to review for this. And so, Google 大神啦. So I thought, I'm not the only one who wants to do company portal app through a proxy. There are like legitimate organizations that has, TLS inspection and like SSL stripping. So their company portal app will break as well. So as expected, some guy put up a post regarding how to fix company portal app login issues in Win 10, Win 11. So after the reboot your PC, reinstall your company portal app, I scroll down, and there it is, the error message in the bottom. The redirection URL is the ms-fx-web thingy. It's like, what was that, right? So I followed the event error code and went to the Windows event viewer on like my local machine, and sure enough, the full URI is there in the event log. So what do I need to do was like extract the redirection URI and craft specially crafted login link for users, so that I could get my correct scope for my tools, right? But before that, I reviewed the log. Interestingly, the whole tenant does not have a company device. It was impossible to sign in from a company device because there's none, right? So you can see the grant control says not satisfied because the company device is required, domain join device is required, so failed but successful in authentication somehow, right? So then I crafted my special source, that's return URI to sign in, and then I was able to talk to the Graph API in non-cloud people terms. That means I could do who am I in the cloud after this. So that means the authentication was working. I could write a tool of this. So did we just weaponize the thing in a week? Because I spent like one day on the discovery bit, and the tool was released a week after, but of course not. So in our red teaming, we needed a generic like a token manipulation tool or authentication tool. So I wrote a generic like authentication tool already, but I added the bypass into my tool with help of our friend ChatGPT, of course. Code base was 85% there, and so yeah. Bit of demo time. Cool to see it works. Let's see. Right. So you can see here, if I sign in, it will say you cannot access from here because you're not joined. And I run the tool. I use the special URI generated, and I go back to the same browser session, and it says, oh, I'm trying to sign in. And I pop open the JavaScript console to copy the error message and paste it there to redeem the correct access and refresh token here. And those tokens could be used to run Graph Runner, role tools, and whatever Graph API, your favorite Graph API exploitation tool. Right. So let's get back to that. So that little video there was the one that people watched 240 hours total. So I'm pretty proud of like the production afterwards. So back to that page. Yeah. Right. So the technical bits up to this point is more or less done. So in my opinion, the second half of the story is the more fun part of the story, actually. Let's talk about like vendor disclosure and so forth, right? Do we need to do responsible disclosure before publishing this? So fortunately, the person, Mr. Chau, already told Microsoft, and as expected, Microsoft tell him to go home. It's a feature. We won't bother this, so I don't need to disclose twice and be told off twice, like the second time. But third gen was the person like wrote tools as well as disclosing like the client ID for me to reverse engineer. So I want to be nice, and I asked him like, we plan to release blog posts and the tool out of your news. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. Let me know it's up. So he's a nice guy. So the timeline so far, 11 November was the first news, and then 12 December disclosure of the vulnerable ID by 3rd Jan. 2 days later, initial research done. A week later, code written and repo was out. And so at 20th of December, I didn't want, so I put it out, but I don't want to promote this because it was like right before the long holidays. I don't want the blue teams to around the world to curse me. And also I was worried like people won't read LinkedIn like right before holiday. Come on, right? But we want to put it out there anyway to timestamp our release. So unfortunately, it caused some trouble. It was the drama right after Boxing Days. This the WhatsApp chat for our internal team, and on 27th night, my boss said, "Hey Sunny, there are a couple of people who are sharing this without crediting us, right?" So they even have the same screenshot that my GitHub page used. I'm like, so angry. And there was one influencer, KOL. He got like thousands of likes and whatever for like sharing our research, but didn't even credit us. So I talked to him nicely. Hey KOL, thank you for covering our tool. I released that a week ago without social media because of holiday season and so forth. That said, would you be kind enough to credit us? Thank you. And he was like, totally understood. No problem. Great tool, by the way. And he did, take a jab at me and saying, researchers, they release things in the holiday season. And so he also reshared our post as well, which is actually quite nice. And it was a very stressful night on 27th because from the rumor of something big and being able to POC that quickly before everyone else, and then pushing out to the community, it's like a lot of our effort and some who went into it. So we wanted to be properly received, and so you can see like the impressions and so forth. And what happened like a while afterwards, 2 months later, Microsoft shadow patched it without any crediting any research in the in the community again. It's like they quietly reduced the scope for the token you could get from company portal. So it used to be like user read all and like group read all, something like that. So you could enumerate groups, users, and so forth with that. But now you could only read the one user you get and the service principal endpoint. So it's like sort of useless from like direct usage kind of standpoint. And also my tool's binary was become malware by Defender. So I felt pretty proud that day as well. And what happened now? So does that mean after the shadow patch the attack has become useless? I would say the attacker will still need to enroll the malicious device into like the tenant. So you need, as a defender, you might need to look out for like malicious device that is registered in your AAD or Entra ID that you don't recognize, and watch out for like the company portal device ID being used like in a specific way by my tool, basically. And yeah, so there was like the detection blog post written by the guys at Coursera, and you can have a look to see if it fits for you as well. Anyhow, the last slide before lunch. I think threat actors and KOLs monitor like the popular company blogs. It's a bit of a moral conundrum for us as well, because when we publish something, like we see it in the wild like a year later for the ransomware groups and so forth, they use stuff that we write. And sometimes like half-written passion project that solves some of your problem might be useful, suddenly weaponized for in case there's something that comes out. So, and the third thing I would say, don't be shy to talk to people who are apparently famous in the community and ask for like what you think you deserve, and make friends along the way. So that would be thank you and Q&A.